Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to begin. Thank you very much for adhering to our tightly packed schedule. Once again, if you're just coming into the room and joining us, I'm Michael Depp. I'm the editor of TVNewsCheck, and I am very pleased today to present three leaders of this industry to talk about a very wide range of questions. I have about 457 for them, and so I'm going to get right to that immediately. And I'll just address the elephant in the room right away. Chris and I did consult on our jacket choices beforehand, and so just want to get that out of the way.
I consulted too.
Yes, exactly. So I'm pleased to introduce Catherine Badalamenti, the president and CEO of Graham Media Group. Princell Hare is the president of Allen Media Broadcasting and newest to this echelon of industry leaders. So welcome to you, Princell. And Chris Ripley is the president and CEO of Sinclair. Welcome to everybody. Give them a big hand.
I didn't know you were bringing your fans.
So let's jump right in. Disney's Bob Iger famously remarked this summer that linear TV may not be core, in his quote, to the company's business, a comment that's obviously resonated very deeply with the markets. Chris, is this an inevitable direction in which the industry is shifting, where linear won't be core and the real TV business ultimately, maybe imminently, is going to survive in streaming?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think there's a little bit of semantics too within this question, because when you're a media company, right, you can deliver your content via streaming. That's just one type of technology. You can deliver it via baseband, or what MVPDs do, and you can have it be linear, or you can have it on demand. You can have it with ads or without ads, and you can do it direct to consumer, or you can do it in a bundled fashion. Those are your basic options. And as you've seen in e-commerce, for instance, or retailing, as that industry has matured, the biggest and best players do both online and they do bricks and mortars, right? Even Amazon has significant bricks and mortars locations. And in media, I think what you're increasingly seeing is that people are offering their content through every one of those different choices. And in fact, when you think I love to point out that linear is actually as popular as ever. We just call it fast, right? And, it's just the streaming equivalent of what baseband linear is. It's the same thing. You've just made a choice to put a linear product out and make it ad supported instead of being on demand and not ad supported. So that I think is, to me, is often linear is kind of put out there as this, doomed medium, but in fact, it's alive and well and will continue into the future. What I think is more important to focus on, and I think is embedded in what Bob is saying, and also in what Disney has done recently, is an acknowledgement that direct to consumer is a very, very expensive business model to supply your content. If you're going to go direct to consumer and not in a bundle, you take on significant amount of technology and marketing costs which didn't exist in a bundled model. And you should look no further than what Disney did with Charter. And you can see that the industry has been, over the last couple of years, with price increases on the direct to consumer side and things like password crackdowns and ads being added, but now is increasingly moving towards what I call the great rebundling. There's an acknowledgement and by Disney, by what they've done, not what they've said, that the bundled business model of pay TV is in fact a better business model for the industry. That doesn't mean direct to consumer necessarily goes away. It just means direct to consumer is going to get a lot more expensive, because it is a lot more expensive to provide your content through direct to consumer. And I think you're going to see a shift starting with this Disney Charter deal and continuing through the rest of the industry back to an emphasis on a communal offering where everyone supplies discounts into the bundle, but then doesn't have all the huge technology costs, doesn't have all the marketing costs, and everyone equally benefits from being inside that bundle. And that's what I think you will see. And I think it's in order to say that linear shouldn't be part of that offering, to me, doesn't make sense. Linear is always going to have a place, but so is on demand, and so is ad-supported, and so is not ad-supported.
You gave an interview, I think a week ago or so, to the Baltimore Sun, suggesting that Sinclair is going to be further diversifying its business, I think, to areas like maybe was it pet food and care homes and things like that. Now, you've been diversifying for some time, but what does that signal to the market about how you see linear specifically and its future potential?
Well, as you pointed out, this is something that has been a component of Sinclair for many years. In fact, the investment portfolio that has now reached about $1.2 billion in value was started back in, I think, 2003, 2004. So it's been 20 years in running. So in some regards, Sinclair is a little bit of an outlier from that perspective. And the reorg that we did was just an acknowledgement that we have these other strategies. And it was really driven not so much about anything to do with broadcast. It was really driven by having transactional flexibility around Tennis Channel and around Compulse 360, and getting financial transparency and getting better credit for assets on Wall Street. And that's really what the reorg is about. We are big believers in broadcast. This year, we're spending $65 million on transformation within broadcast. That includes cloud. It includes our unified ad platform, which will be first in the industry, and includes things like DDAS. And so we are investing heavily in broadcast, and we believe in its future. But we reorganized in order to highlight and give flexibility to the other parts of our business.
All right, Prince, so let's get to another headline here. ABC. Obviously, Byron Allen is very bullish on linear still. He's put his hand up, having made essentially a $10 billion bid for the ABC stations. Nexstar is probably almost certainly in the hunt, too. What's the latest? What can you tell us about this bid?
Well, if you've met my boss, you know that he's very bashful and keeps everything very close to the vest. Look, we are very interested in the ABC owned and operated stations and the ABC network. Byron has been very public about that. We do believe that broadcasting is a core part of our business, but there's not a process in place yet. There's no investment bank that's been retained that we know of to provide valuations and to really start the process of acquisition. But when that does happen, there will only really be one phone call that Bob Iger needs to make.
Well, so in 2023, though, it's still a viable proposition to go after a linear network and the O&O stations?
Absolutely. The broadcast business is still a very viable business. The NFL just recently did a deal that goes through 2033. I don't think the NFL is going anywhere. It's a huge driver of our businesses. We still need local stations to inform, educate our communities. Severe weather, breaking news, those things are still very important in the local news makeup, being engaged with the community. And the broadcast stations are the best positioned to provide those services.
Catherine, you have long been a very digitally bullish person, one of the most so in the industry. What do you think is the right strategy or the right formula for executing this transition into streaming here? I mean, is it to build basically a fully viable shadow business in streaming, endure a few more lean years there where the revenue is not nearly what it's going to be, what it is in linear, and then just sort of be ready to catch every viewer as they make the migration, as they're steadily moving in that direction? Or is it a long-term coexistence of linear and streaming, or is it something else altogether?
Chris kind of talked about this a bit, but, there is this, we are bullish on streaming, and I think that we absolutely agree that there is room for coexistence, and that, my personal view is that we need to make sure that we are there for when our consumers are looking for us. And that's what I always point to, is that they're finding us. It's not like we have to do massive marketing to try to get the consumers in our audience and our community to actually go and find our programming. It supports the idea that we're important to them and that we will continue to be important to them. So we need to be there. But I also think that it's this amazing opportunity for us to be able to experiment in a big way. We can learn so much from what we're doing on the streaming side and then have that translate over to what we're doing on our linear broadcast stations. We can do the same on broadcast and translate it over to streaming. The two coexist perfectly in my mind. And I think that we need to just continue to stay ahead of answering what the consumer's looking for and making sure that we're providing it where they're at.
Let's talk about another elephant in the room, the station network relationship. I don't think it's a surprise to anyone that the health of that network affiliate relationship is not one that many people would characterize as terribly healthy right now. And a major scene has opened up in the issue over negotiating for VPD rights, where both the networks and the affiliates have launched lobbying groups for their respective positions. Chris, how optimistic are you that the stations are going to have a chance to sit at the table and negotiate directly with the VMVPDs?
So first, Michael, I would take umbrage with the notion that the network affiliate relationship is not in good shape. In fact, each network has about $2 billion, or 2 billion reasons a year to think that it actually is in good shape. And that's, rough justice about how much each affiliate group sends the various networks, and that is a significant part of the economics of being a network that didn't exist, by the way, 10 years ago, and that to me is an incredibly important fact that makes the relationship all that much more important. In fact, if I had a choice between not sending the networks any money and sending them money, I'd rather be sending them money, because that means I'm more important to them than I ever have been. Used to be 20 years ago, they used to send us money. I don't know if anyone remembers that. No, network comp. And so we are incredibly important to the success of the networks long term. And in terms of the virtual issue, I have a lot of confidence that will get resolved longer term. I see a world in the not too distant future where every distributor is a virtual distributor. I think that is just a matter of time. There is a phenomenon in technology where hardware becomes software over time, and virtual versus traditional MVPDs is just nothing more than getting rid of your set-top box and changing it in for an app. All right. And an app is a lot cheaper than a set-top box. And so, but the offering is essentially the same. It's the bundled offering that I referred to earlier, where the content providers get together, they provide discounts to one operator, and it's sold as one big bundle to the consumer, which is the best economic model for both the content providers and for the consumers. Although it costs a little bit more for the consumers, they get more optionality and they get more content in exchange for this business model. So in a world where every distributor is eventually virtual, this needs to get figured out. It has to, because under the current economics of the industry, there will be no broadcast industry in a world where every distributor is virtual. So it either gets figured out, or the subsidization of local news, which ends up happening because of how the industry is set up through retrans and through the network relationships, that will go away. Local news, as we know it today, would go away. And I just think those are unacceptable outcomes for this country, from a governmental perspective, from a regulatory perspective, from a societal perspective. Those are unacceptable outcomes. And I think the conversion to virtual is also an inevitability. As I mentioned, it's a technological inevitability. So when you add all that up, it just has to be resolved, and I think it will be.
So the question then, Princella, Catherine, you want to jump in on this? Who's going to do that? Should the NAB be arbitrating this conversation and maybe helping get everybody on the same page here? How do you untangle that knot? It
isn't some, Chris is actually talking about the real issue, which is distribution, and it's not so much a network conversation when we're talking about that. I can tell you that we have, the number one station in Jacksonville. We best the next two network stations combined. Endless hours of local news. The commitment to the community is there, but we don't actually get distributed on Hulu. And there's nothing I can do about that. They can just decide that they don't have to carry us. And that really is the issue that's at the concern, because the issue for us is carriage, making sure that they're carrying our stations, and then the conversation about how we're getting compensated is behind that. But first and foremost, making sure that we are there when that transition happens. And I know you and I talked at the beginning about Emily's article that was in TVNewsCheck yesterday about Xumo. I've been worried about Xumo for months because we are getting knocked out of the bundle when people are actually calling and deciding that they want to sign up for the new streaming service. And that's the biggest issue for us right now.
I'll address the NAB part of your question, and that is, the tagline for the NAB is they are the voice of the nation's television and radio broadcasters. They absolutely have to have an opinion and absolutely have to be involved in helping us resolve this.
Let's shift gears, talk about programming and syndication. The syndication market's been constricting dramatically for years now. Princella, I know you're going to be very happy to tell us Byron Allen has plenty left in inventory in the market, and we will come back and let you speak to that in a few minutes. But I'm first interested in what your colleagues think about how their programming needs are being met. Catherine, when you look at the syndication market right now, what do you see?
We really like Jeopardy and Wheel. We are, and again, going back to my comment earlier about what we're learning through streaming, we have to figure out new ways of how to program our stations, because there isn't a lot of, I'd say, daytime syndication offerings that are answering our needs at this time. So figuring out how to create content, and not just adding, and I think that we're going to talk about this too, adding more news hours today, that's not going to be the solution for us. I don't think the consumer wants more hours of news. So figuring out how we can create local programming that's compelling, partnering with other local broadcasters to actually fill that need as well. Nothing's off the table.
So speaking of that, Chris, Sinclair has a content development relationship with Anthony Zeiker, who I spoke with a few months ago on a different NAB stage. He created the CSI franchise, and now he's working with you on documentary material, I think game show, all sorts of different things. How's that progressing? Is anything ready for the market yet?
Yeah, it's progressing nicely. We have 2 pilots in the market and set to hopefully go live for the 2024 season. So we're having those discussions. Obviously, a pilot does not make a successful show, but we're going through the process. And
is a game show one of the pilots?
Yes, game show, and the other is a talk show.
And there were documentaries as well.
Yeah, those weren't made for broadcast. Those docuseries would be for well, no, they would those would be sold to someone like a Netflix who tends to do a big business in those types of content genres. It is really a big opportunity, I think, for us and any other broadcaster. When you take a look at some of the more popular series, you'll quickly notice, like for instance, the Murdochs, for instance, that a lot of the footage comes from our stations. That is made up those docuseries, and so there is, I think, we recognize it as an opportunity that Anthony's helping us with, is making them and then selling them on. I don't think they necessarily fit our broadcast model, so that they wouldn't be something that we would distribute or air ourselves, but it's content that can be made from our activities, and it'll be sold to the best outlet for it.
And Princella, I think that Entertainment Studios has now consolidated the court market completely, nearly.
Well, we are still very bullish on syndication at Allen Media Group. We produce 9 out of the 12 court shows that are currently on the air and in production. We've seen some success at our stations with Funny You Should Ask as an early news lead-in. Comics Unleashed, which is currently airing on CBS late night, is exceeding our expectations. We've had some success with some of the weather syndicated programming that we produce, like Storms of Suspicion or Weather Gone Viral. So we have other programming that we have in production. We believe in the model, and we're going to continue to produce.
I was talking recently with a syndication executive at Tegna on our podcast, from which Sinclair recently picked up entertainment magazine show called Daily Blast Live in about 20 or so of its markets. And this executive said that in the absence of getting sufficiently compelling TV from the studios, the likely path, as you were saying, Catherine, is for station groups to start to work together for programming for each other. Do all of you see that as sort of, as do you agree with that assessment?
Yes, I can tell you that we produced a show in San Antonio that was really popular, and decided that we're going to go and expand it beyond just San Antonio. It's called Texas Eats, and now we have it running on our Houston market. But there's no reason why it couldn't be something that expands beyond just our two markets into other parts of Texas. It makes sense. We'll make sure we're covering Austin and Dallas and have great content from those markets too, that I would imagine those stations would be happy to pick up.
Now, I'm sort of compelled to ask about, what you're getting from the networks right now, particularly in prime time, and any of you can take this. Do you see them, I feel like someone's going to take umbrage with the premise of my question perhaps, but do you see them continuing to route their best shows to the streamers? And what's the recourse if that's what continues to be the case?
Look, the quality of the programming of the networks has to continue in order for us to be successful in our various stations in our markets. We still have to hold the networks accountable for hiring the best producers to produce shows for us. I would watch anything that Dick Wolf produces. So I think as long as the networks continue to offer the stations quality programming in prime time, I think the relationship is still solid.
I'll just add to that the serialized dramas, which are a big part of the entertainment ecosystem, that left the scene years ago. From a broadcast perspective, our main platforms are not well suited for that, and that's fine. The content that we get from the networks, which is, the best of it is sports, and then a lot of it is big event style, more reality focused programming, like The Voice, for instance. And that works well for us. And so there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's, horses for courses. And, the important thing, and I'll cycle back to one of the things I said in the beginning, is that serialized dramas that are viewed as sort of maybe up in the upper echelon of desirable content, that those be put back into the bundle. And that's what you're seeing with the Charter Disney deal and inclusion of Disney Plus and ESPN Plus into the bundle. To me, that's an important step to keep the bundle strong. You don't want people having to go outside of the bundle to get access to that content. As long as it's inside the bundle, that's the most important aspect from my perspective.
I want to touch on the strikes very briefly. They were very bruising to media and entertainment generally. I wonder, any of you can take this, what did this illuminate for the station groups in terms of the path forward with the networks and the studios? What were some lessons you maybe took away from this experience, of course still ongoing with the actors?
Well, I think that, conversations had started to what does our world look like, especially if you're an NBC affiliate, for example, when the late night shows weren't running and we had kind of not the great lead into our late news. That ongoing conversation is, do we get back an hour from the network and be able to utilize that for our late news starting a lot earlier, especially in our eastern markets? It just doesn't today. That seems to make more and more sense. And I think that what we saw with the strike just emphasized that even more. I think that both sides would benefit from that if we were to be able to take back that hour and have better programming for the 2 hours that we get from them and be able to start our local news an hour earlier. So I think that it just emphasized that would be a good move for all of us.
And you mentioned earlier that more news is not always the answer to just another hour of another newscast. So you're playing around a lot with different formats and news adjacent kind of programming. You just mentioned the show in Texas, for instance. So what are you learning from that? What sort of adjacencies are most appealing to viewers?
And it really is, not having more hours of a traditional local newscast. We are challenging everybody to try to figure out how to be more inventive and innovative when we're looking at what kind of news we're producing. I think that we have a problem as an industry when all of our newscasts look relatively the same. And really emphasizing that with our newsrooms. We're doing a massive study where we're actually asking the consumer, go figure, to tell us what they want from us, and trying to use all of that data to be able to inform how we can do a better job. I think our natural reaction for years ago is just to add another hour of news, and it doesn't make sense to me. I think that if we're going to be adding hours of local news programming, it needs to look a lot different than it does today.
We have to change our mindset. Our viewers have told us that there's a lack of differentiation in local news. There's too much repetition, and there's nothing in it really for me. So, as broadcasters, we really have to listen to that and look at what we're doing on a daily basis and really become more engaged with our communities, what's happening in our communities, look at different kinds of content, whether it's lifestyle or business or restaurants or what have you, things that really impact people on a daily basis in their lives. Those are the kinds of programs that we need to put on the air.
Let's talk some more about news. This has not been an easy year for TV newsrooms. And I wonder, is this something as leaders that all of you are genuinely attuned to? Are you talking to your newsrooms about where and how and why they are struggling?
It's a big issue. We've launched an entire culture initiative at the station so that we're teaching leaders how to be better listeners and making sure that they're taking time to spend, lots of quality time with their employees, listening to them, to what their challenges are. I really feel like we have to figure out what's happening and then answer those challenges. And it all starts with those leaders at the local level. I think that newsrooms can be very difficult places for people, and I think that for many, many years we have put up with bad behavior. I've stated to our entire organization, I will not put up with that bad behavior any longer. I think a lot of the work ends up being piled on the few that are doing a really fabulous job and others get a pass. I think that we have inequality when it comes to the way that we pay people, the way that the work is being distributed across the newsroom, and all of those are things that we're entirely focused on and something that I've committed to our organization that I need to fix.
I want to come to pay in just a second, but Prince Hill or Chris, do you want to speak to that?
Well, we are in the budget process now with our stations, and we're sitting down with the GMs, the news directors, and the general sales managers, and really going through, kind of what happened this year and looking forward to next year. And there are several pain points that our newsrooms have, recruiting, pay, those kinds of things. And we just have to we have to listen to our newsrooms. We have to listen to our folks and make adjustments accordingly as we can. We have to improve the culture in the newsrooms, make them great places to work. I came up in the business in a newsroom as a producer and just kind of worked my way up to where I am today. And I look back on what I did 30 years ago when I started in the business as a producer and look at what these producers have to do now. It's unbelievable what we're asking them to do on a daily basis. So it's something that we're certainly conscious of, and we're always looking for ways that we can help relieve some of the pressure.
And to me, it's just emblematic of a situation where you've got our artificial regulatory framework that ends up leading to each market having 4 to 6 suppliers of video local news. And, the economic rationale to do that has changed significantly a long time ago. And so because of that, you've got these two forces going against each other, and you're making operating a newsroom a lot more challenging on issues like pay, on issues on how much they have to do. It exasperates it. So that is really it comes down to the model at the end of the day that is being forced upon the industry that is unsustainable.
But is there something that you can do right now this coming year to raise pay? Is that a viable prospect? I mean, given that model, I understand that, and I want to talk about regulation in a second, but can you, I mean, because it seems like you got a retention problem that's built into that, a recruitment issue that's also built into that.
Oftentimes for us it's not about the pay. I feel like we are always trying to be very competitive when it comes to our pay. I think that there's a lot of issues. I think mission is a big part of it. I think a lot of the young people that we're hiring out of school, they'll leave a job without even having another job lined up. And it's just sort of the situation that we're in right now. And they'll say, this is what I thought it was. And we have to deal with that. I think that it has to do with better recruiting, making sure that we're giving them better training when they come on, making sure they're better supported. A lot of those are the issues that are causing our pain, more so than even pay. It's that they just don't feel mission driven, and they don't really feel, like this is something that they're going to have a long-term career from. And those are issues that thankfully we can resolve.
So Chris, you had to close 5 stations, news producing stations this year. Is that down to, as you see, the model?
Yeah, no, it is. And, the reality is, if you take a look at other example, industries, like the newspaper industry in its heyday, most markets, were supplied by 1, maybe 2 suppliers, and where they were supplied very well from a local news perspective until obviously, the entire model of the industry, was challenged, and now, most local newspapers, sort of are a shadow of their former self. There is no reason why there should be 4 to 6 or more local news players in a market. You would, if consolidation was allowed, it would happen immediately. And you would have a much better product. You would have a much better work environment. The public would be better served. The model would be appropriate for the environment that it's in. And that's what really needs to get fixed, from my perspective.
So you have finally a full slate of FCC commissioners. You got a market crying out for an industry crying out for regulatory relief. Do you see any prospect of getting that relief from this FCC now?
Well, I think it's challenging, to see any sort of relief coming, under this, current administration. And unfortunately, it's dogma, right? It's, media consolidation is an issue that is more religion than it is, reality. And, the nice thing about where the industry is that when you actually dig in and look at the facts and, in an unbiased way, the arguments that we make around, consolidation and the reality of our competition, which is big media and big tech, which are hundreds, if not thousands of times larger than we are. They have the benefit of having, being factually correct and sort of the right side of reality. And so I think eventually, I like to believe that, dogma can only last for so long. Thousands
of years sometimes. So are we going to see a winnowing down to 2 news producing stations in the market sometime in the next couple of years? Is that a realistic prospect in the markets where we have 4 and up, that we might see 2 or 1?
I think it's very difficult from a sustainability standpoint of having 4, 5, 6 producers of news in any given market. I just don't think that's reality going forward.
Speaking of sustainability, generative AI has now come onto the scene. It's very widely talked about it. We're going to talk about it in great detail this afternoon. And there's a strong case to be made that that technology could play a substantive role in aiding the production of your newscast in a kind of intellectual capacity. I wonder, are each of you right now developing company-wide frameworks to assimilate this technology, what it means, what the implications are? How are you dealing with that institutionally?
We created a policy that I'm sure is going to be constantly evolving. I personally feel like this can help solve some of our issues with capacity, but it also has to be done through the lens of journalism so that we're continuing to make sure that we are verifying and factual and doing all of the reporting that needs to still happen. But it can save a tremendous amount of time, and we should be focused on it so that we don't have some new players entering into our sphere without actually being able to, jump on the bandwagon ourselves. So it is tremendously important, but we also need to make sure that we're doing it the right way and are careful as we launch into it. But it can save tremendous time in the newsroom.
Yeah, I'll just add to that I think it is, at least at this point, an important tool to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of our people in the content centers, but it's not a replacement. It's an augmentation.
It's not a replacement now. Could it be? Would that be within reason to think? I mean, that a producer could be a virtualized position a couple of years from now, if the technology is fully realized to execute that?
Again, not having a crystal ball and knowing exactly what the capabilities will be in the future. I know today, where we are today, it's certainly not a replacement. I don't see it becoming a replacement anytime soon. But as the saying goes, it's not AI that will take your job. It's the person who can best utilize AI that will take your job. And that's the same, I think, when you think of, you can apply that axiom to a company, to an industry, and if we don't equip our people with AI, then they put our entire industry and company at risk. But I don't see it being a replacement.
Just lastly on the news front, are each of you happy with your news? Do you like what you see when you watch it? And do you feel like, as some leaders of groups do, that this needs a massive overhaul, that this is not good product or insufficient? What do you think about the sausages you're making?
I like a lot of what we do, but we have tremendous opportunity to improve our product. And I don't think that anyone at Graham would tell you that that's a surprise to hear me say that. You just look to them. We just did newsroom surveys, and they don't watch our product. They don't consume our product. And that's something that we've been wrestling with for many years, that they don't feel compelled enough to actually feel like the value that we're providing is enough for them to even tune in or read what we're creating. So I always use that as an example of we need to, if we're not even satisfying our own employees, that's a pretty big sign.
I like a lot of what we do in our markets as well. There's always room for improvement in what we do. The level of engagement is not where I would like it to be in our markets. I think we really have to look at news as a bundle. It's what we're doing on linear, it's what we're doing on social, it's what we're doing on our app, our mobile apps, what have you. And we really have to create content that is unique to the specific platform. And I don't think we're there yet in doing that. And I really think for us, as we continue to grow as a station group and look to add, additional stations, we're really going to have to keep an eye on where the consumer is and creating content that is unique to that particular platform.
Yeah, I think what Prinzel said is really important. There's nothing wrong with our newscasts. They're excellent newscasts, and they are appropriate for the audience that is consuming them. The reality is that the audience has changed over time, and people's consumer behavior has changed over time. And we know that the younger generation still desires local news tremendously. but does not want to consume it the way we produce it. And that's the core challenge. And it goes back to, being on these platforms and, producing a different style for the platforms, a different level of engagement. And then, there are obviously challenges as well with that in terms of what the economic model is for those platforms. So, we look at it from a multi-platform perspective and a multi-audience perspective. And that is there's nothing wrong with our newscasts. They're great newscasts, but it's horses for courses. They have a certain target, and there are other targets that need to be addressed within that ecosystem.
There are two more topics I want to be sure to hit on in the 5 minutes we have left, and one of them is sports. Chris, and I'm not going to call you to the carpet on Diamond Sports right now, but its collapse has set off a very dramatic chain of events in the sports rights landscape. And now we see Scripps, Gray, Nexstar all moving to bring major pro sports back to broadcast TV. So just walk me through the economics of this. Are they right in thinking that they're in a solid position to bid for partial packages of basketball, baseball, hockey? Can that work?
Well, we've led the pack there, right? We did a deal with the Jazz in Utah. And so I think it's, when I take a look at that transaction, which was very mutually beneficial to both us and the Jazz, it is a model going forward, but it is a different model. And, the economics for the teams have to go down in order for it to work. But it's a basic trade-off of reach for dollars. And if teams, I think if they're long-term thinking in terms of the popularity of their team and their sport more generally, they will make that trade of more reach for less dollars. I think some of the people in the space were probably got a little out over their skis and probably made some deals that didn't make sense. But people will figure that out very quickly and get rational. And, I think it's a great opportunity for broadcasters to get more tentpole content. But the economics, economic for reach equation needs to make sense.
Catherine and Princell, do you want to make a go at this? Is this a business for you?
Absolutely. At Allen Media, we are open to everything. When Chris talks about the model, and he's absolutely right. I mean, the reason the regional sports business is in trouble is because, sports rights continue to go like this, and the subscription revenue continue to go like this. And, in order for this to make sense for us, we have to have the right model. We have to do the right deal. But I think from an audience perspective, they're going to be looking for their themes. Sports is inherently local. It is tribal. And for local stations to get involved in that business, whether it's, a package of games, a suite of games, the entire season, whatever it is, I think it's an important thing for us to be involved in our local markets.
I was going to say, we don't have a ton of opportunity we don't have a lot of, duopolies or, stations where we can actually have full sports rights, but we are, talking with, sports teams about those point the package or be able to have some, we like the idea of being able to have those local games. I do know that from some of the early signs, the Gray station in Phoenix, the WNBA numbers were out of this world. And so it's a really great thing to be able to have the power of broadcast, have those stations, because they're thinking that what's going to happen when the NBA games are actually on that station. All indication is that the numbers are going to be phenomenal, which is a great thing. Like we said, it's got to be the partnership and knowing that reach, like Chris said, is worth the economics that we need to be able to continue the relationship.
In the minute or so and a bit I have left, I just want to be sure to touch on ATSC3, and we do have a discussion about that later this afternoon, a fireside chat with One Media, which we'll get into more detail. But a couple of things. Catherine, you were among the group of CEOs who went to visit Chairwoman Rosenworcel back, I think, in January or so. And then shortly thereafter, the announcement of a task force on ATSC3 was. Has anything come of that substantively since?
Yes. So we did go see the chairwoman and talk to her about how important it was for the FCC to be a partner in this. And she did announce for us to create a task force with her. I think that we are seeing really great, there's a lot that has to be determined. And I know that conversations that we're having today and the things that we need to do as an industry in order to move it forward is actually commit. And so a lot of that's where we're at right now is figuring out with that task force how we go forward and committing to certain dates and making sure that we're going to be behind the launches at a certain point and the conversation of from 1.0 to 3.0, how we make that transition. So all of those things are being discussed and they're all complex and they're all being figured out with the help of the FCC. So I think that it's very, I think we're excited about the progress that's been made. Now it's kind of on us too to actually be a part of the commitment to make sure we can move it forward.
And Chris, Sinclair's sort of been John the Baptist on ATSC3 from the beginning. You had some potholes though, the OEM issue with LG. Now they can't carry the chips in the sets. There have been some tests, I think, with 5G and low power TV and as a potential alternative. So what message can you send us out with on the ongoing viability of this technology? There are a lot of GMs who they're excited about it coming through.
Yeah, look, I think no doubt it's moving slower than I think everyone wanted to. But we are at 65% of the country. New York, in fact, it might be higher now that New York just lit up. So significant progress has been made. The LG issue, I think, is just a temporary issue. I wouldn't pay much attention to it. And you mentioned 5G broadcast. That's like dialing back the clock 5+ years. So, it's already not happening fast enough on 3.0 for us. Why would we go back 5 years, take an inferior technology, and have all the same obstacles to adoption that we have today? Right? You still, no current wireless carrier actually uses 5G broadcast, so you still need to get it in the phone. They have no incentive to ask it for it to be in the phone. And that's something that we'll have to figure out as an industry if we want to be in phones. But it's the same obstacle whether you use 5G broadcast or not. You're just using an inferior technology and one which we don't have the FCC approval to roll out, and one that we would then have to go through another upgrade cycle, which look how long it took us just to get where we are with 3.0. But I actually think we're right in that moment, that lull before things start to really take off with 3.0. I want to show you something here I've got beside me, which is this is a working unit that I just got handed to me from BitPath for enhanced GPS, and this uses 3.0, and it will make whatever it's attached to have a precision of 3 centimeters rather than say 3 meters. I think this is going to be incredibly impactful, and it's got nothing to do with broadcast itself, and it's going to roll out at some point next year. So it's been slow progress so far, no doubt about it, but we're finally getting to the point where we actually have near nationwide coverage. This FCC process, hopefully be the last push to get it over the edge. But we have, it's been incredibly hard work and herding cats to get to this point. And, the rewards of that are actually just around the corner. And to dial that back now would be insane.
All right. Watch this space. I've put you through a lot of questions. Thank you so much. Everyone join me, please, in thanking Prince Hare, Catherine Valente, and Chris Ripping. Thank you.